Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us, Meghna. We have Igor, myself, and Meghna here talking about real women in tech. Meghna has been one of the very real women in tech that I've had the pleasure of working very closely with. If I had to summarize her presence, it was always the calming and the commanding. And that's how I would summarize it. And it's been an honor to work with Meghna on this podcast and bring her on the show. And without further ado, I want to get into the amazing story that, Meghna, you have of having flavored so many big tech and now in the startup world. So you're really crossing the chasm all the way into uncharted territories. And you've done a fantastic job navigating this maze of tech. Tell us about where did this all begin?
Yeah, thank you, first of all, Shivam and Igor. Thank you for having me. I saw the last few episodes of Real Women in Tech, and obviously an amazing series. So feel fortunate to be here. So thanks for making me part of this. Yeah, I would say, well, I've been in the industry for some time now, so I can say it became it came about a long time ago. But
Okay.
it's been a really interesting and fantastic journey, I would say. I think growing up, I never really thought I would ever be working in tech. It was, I grew up in very traditional ways back in India, and it was more like my journey to become a homemaker eventually. Things led me to US through an arranged marriage, and that's what I think changed my life. My husband, of course, had a very different view of life than I had at the time of marriage. And I was quite young as well. And so he is the one who sort of pushed me to, think beyond my limits, really, delve into the world of tech. Um, and I first was quite mad at him because I thought, why? Like, you're earning money. Why do I need to do that? I'll just take care of the rest of the things. But honestly, I did not really realize the power of what he was, asking me to do or showing me the path for. And one thing led to another. Decided to wing it and see where the journey really takes me. And it did. I think the sheer thought of finding that financial independence and surrounding myself with people who I was learning from, day in and day out, just really led me, fueled curiosity within me and just the energy within me to go from one role to the other and, one company to the other. I'm very thankful and grateful for the journey that I have had and the people who have surrounded me in this as well to help me get here.
Wonderful. That's quite an unconventional story. So let's go a little deeper. You came here and then you decided to start looking for jobs, or did you go into getting more degrees? Tell me more about how did it all pan out?
It was both, I would say. I was never the very studious kind growing up. I would say I come from a family where everybody went to IIT, which is a very prestigious college in India. And I never really wanted to. I think what I realized was just over the years that I think what my parents did really well was inculcate confidence in me no matter what or where I was. So I was never afraid of jumping into new things or trying out experiences that, were probably unique for folks or they were, afraid of it. So I was not worried. I thought I could accomplish anything if I really want to. Right. And so that led me to really, just delve myself into talking to a bunch of people once I came to US. I was in this world of, you know, all these big companies around me. Everybody who I met was working in one of the technology companies at that time. And that helped. I truly believe that surrounding yourself with folks who push your limits, who make you think differently than the thought process that you've sort of grown up with or surrounded yourself with. I think that is really, really important. I mean, don't they say that you're the sum of five people you interact with? So it's very important to think about who are those five people and to identify them, spot them, who will push you through your limits, who will really make you feel and see, things that you are not able to imagine for yourself. And with my parents, my husband, some of the mentors and, folks that I found over the years did that for me, somewhere in the workspace, somewhere in, at home and friend circle. And so I find myself quite fortunate. But, just keeping that in mind, essentially, I just started talking to people, interviewing in places, reading books, and I got fortunate. I got a break in a small company as a developer. Didn't enjoy it that much. I thought like I was not the developer type. I did not really enjoy coding, but I definitely enjoyed talking to a lot of people and being the connective tissue in any organization and bringing people together and, having the big picture in mind and, being able to connect with folks. And so all of that just led me to kind of define my path in terms of, moving from one role to another, program management, product management, being an analyst, strategy operations. So I tried like various roles, just, navigated the various companies and cultures within the companies and enjoyed doing that and really had a good time doing that. So it wasn't a very well thought out journey, I would say. It just one thing led me to the other.
It's wonderful to hear. Yes, and we always think of those star resumes that often get talked about is like, well, I went to the Stanford and then I went to Harvard and I got this MBA and then I got this, and then people think that there is this recipe out there that you can
Yeah.
follow
Yeah.
and get to these positions of influence and power. And increasingly, I feel like the real life is lived in the trenches, and the learnings and experiences that you get with that hands-on experience in these companies really builds you for those positions.
One thing I'd like to share is that at some point, I felt like I was lacking not having done my master's at some point. Here I was in big tech, working with all these folks who are from like Stanford, MIT, IIT, all of these colleges. So there's always an imposter syndrome that sets in, and you think about what am I missing? Like, there are probably some frameworks out there. There's something out there that I don't know, and I need to go see that as well. So I did go through, my executive programs at Stanford and other places, which I think in the end, I would say only helped with my confidence. But there also, I felt like just making the connections with people was a lot more useful than actually delving into frameworks and learning about, theoretical areas. So, again, like, surround yourself with smart people and you'll learn and you'll grow is what my mantra is.
I'm glad you mentioned the word imposter syndrome, because I know when I joined corporate engineering, which was the broader team that we both were part of, I definitely had a lot of it. It was just seeping through my veins every single day. And I've always spoken very proudly about it, because people sometimes hide it and say, oh, no, I think I just belong here. And it's like, I didn't feel I belonged here. And it took me a long while, almost a year and a half, seeing inspiring leaders like you can make myself belong here. And
Sure.
over time, it became my village, to the point that I miss it so much now that I'm not part of it. So it's seeing women like you, surrounding yourself with those people, to your point, actually gives beacons of hope to many others, even when you don't know they might be watching you. So,
You're too kind. Thank you.
all right. So let's talk about your transition from Google. I mean, you had a fantastic career, and it is definitely a lovely place to be. You're doing so well, and you decided you wanted to do something different. I'm seeing a streak of courage and boldness in you. I've always observed it, courage, and go and just do this.
Yeah, it was not an easy decision, I would say, because Google, I mean, Google is just fantastic. And especially I was fortunate to have joined it in the very early stages. There were about 3,000 some employees at that time at Google post IPO. But, that was the time when Google was really redefining the way employee experience should be or how employees should be treated in the industry. And so it was really empowering and something really fantastic about being part of that journey and really learning from it as well. And over the years, obviously, I was fortunate to have moved around in different roles and then having moved to tech at some point. And I think internal mobility was fantastic at Google, which really enabled you to experience different parts of Google in different ways as well. So at some point, I felt Google got really, really big. By the time I left, there were 160,000 some people. So 3,260 was obviously, I saw a lot of change there, a lot of scale as well. But it was really you know, the thought of sort of going and working in a smaller place, a smaller space where you can drive execution faster, you can be part of something bigger. As companies grow, you obviously become a part of a sliver of the entire large, ecosystem. And so it was just just the drive to have larger impact. And so I started thinking about, okay, what that could look like outside. And, I'd worked with Leanne Honze, who was at Google for a while, and so I had a lot of conversations with many people. And there was a role at Palo Alto Networks really looking for, someone to lead employee experience and strat ops. And it was a great opportunity. It was a smaller, company that's 14, 15,000 people. And so that was a fantastic experience as well, right? Moving on to something which is, you could execute faster. So, but that honestly made me really think that, wow, like, smaller companies are great. I should look for something even smaller. But it wasn't really, it wasn't really actively seeking something like that at that point. But I was really inspired and very curious about the startup world, having lived in Silicon Valley for so many years, and after joining Google after it was IPO, I had never really, you know, experienced anything like a startup. And I felt like my career would be incomplete if I don't, especially living here in the Valley. And interestingly, I came across Dheeraj Pandey, who's a fantastic leader, by the way, and who runs DevRev and had led Nutanix earlier. And, out of curiosity, I reached out and we had a conversation around what does it mean to be part of a startup and what is the life like? And for someone like who has been in like these larger companies, what would a life at startup really look like? And at that point, I wasn't really thinking that I'm going to, make a move to a startup. Went for a long walk and we were having a conversation. And, and 45 minutes into the conversation, I realized I'm being interviewed. At the end, he did encourage me to, look into DevRev itself. One thing led to another, and I did it. But some of the things that really attracted me to the role have been mainly around, again, my sheer mantra is around yourself as smart people, and then you'll continue to learn. Like if you're the smartest person in the room, obviously you're in the wrong room. It's important to evaluate the people who are around the table, across the table from you, because that's where you'll learn. So curiosity, learning, trying to have an impact in a smaller space, in a smaller company. All of that were just fantastic things for me, really aligned to my values and my growth path. And I said, yeah, why not just do it, right? What's the worst that can happen? Let's just go and figure it out. And what kept me going even after joining, it's been a year now here, is the authenticity of people, but then at the same time, patience of you would make mistakes and just, pick yourself up and move on and just learn from it and move on. So I think those were some of the values I felt aligned with the way I thought as well. I guess, if you think too much, if you take a step back and you evaluate a lot of pros and cons, then it just makes it really hard to make any decisions. I've never been the type who would put an Excel spreadsheet together thinking about pluses and the minuses of things. And I connect with people. And when I connect with people, then I know that I'm going to thrive there and I'm going to have fun while doing the work. And so those are the things that I paid attention to, and that gave me the courage to just, just go, just do it.
Fantastic. Yes, the courage is definitely shining through in all of these endeavors. All right, we'll talk a little bit about these the companies that you've been at and the formal gender equity and gender inclusion programs that are becoming a bread and butter of many organizations. I think there's a research that says that around 8 in 10 companies have formal programs instituted to help women not get stalled in middle management. Yet, we all know that that is just far from what the reality is on the ground. And many of us who just back out, in various stages, maybe to come back, and at a later stage. But there is definitely, if not the glass ceiling, sort of a broken ladder at some point where you're just like, I don't see myself going forward. And for a little while, I opened up my LinkedIn to have chats with anybody who just wanted to talk about their careers. You'd be surprised the number of women who shared, I'm doing everything right. I'm getting all the A's or the A pluses, and I just don't see the growth that I'm looking for. And so I'm curious from your perspective, what specific strategies have companies devised or implemented which have actually worked in this area? And what is that success factor from your perspective which really makes a difference?
At this time, I don't think we have to prove to people how diversity really fuels innovation in many ways, right? And I think it's like, how much do we keep that front and center? It's easier said than done, right? And a lot of times you do encounter, whether it's boys club or whatever you want to call it, right? It happens. It's normal. It happens here in the Valley. It's existed everywhere, smaller companies, big companies. But I also see a lot of positivity. I also see a lot of, people really wanting to make the difference, really treating this as an important area for them to, push things. I think I see that tide is shifting a little bit. I think it's not always about the numbers, but the numbers are also shifting, right? So I don't look at it as like it's always doom and gloom. Obviously, there's a long path that women have to cover and move forward with, but I'd really look at it in a very positive way. There's so many women coming into the workforce, and there's so many women who are, helping and supporting other women bring in the workforce as well, right? So there's negativity, but there's a lot of positivity too. And I'm always the one who's always focused on the positive, right? Rather than talking about doom and the gloom. In terms of the programs, I mean, companies devise their own ways of doing things, right? I don't think that there's one size that fits all, or there's one program that a company implements and then every other company needs to follow that same suite as well. Cultures are different. The most important thing is to, I feel, for the leaders and people around us to learn how to lead with them. So, what does it mean to really understand what challenges that they really face? And keeping that in mind, like devising ways of working or an environment which allows women to thrive in that environment as well. And when I say that, I mean like things like flexible work environments, really ensuring that we're providing opportunities. So, having fairness in the way people are evaluated, having fairness in the way candidates are evaluated, and then promotion decisions are evaluated, women population, and creating opportunities for them within the workspace. I think keeping the topic front and center is also important because it gets forgotten a lot of times, right? And I think it's not that hard because I do see the desire for folks to push this agenda forward, then really not put it at the back burner. I find myself, spending less and less time convincing why this is important, but more and more time actively seeking questions from, or allies having seeking questions from as women or other, people in the room in terms of what would really help or what can I do. Like it really warms my heart when I see people on the teams or leaders within our organization or people I've worked with wanting to ask like, hey, this happened and this is what I did. Like, what can I be doing better? How can I bring in more women? What can I do to do more? So to attract more talent or, really help more and more of them be up and coming within my own organization. So I really see that tide shifting and people asking the right questions. I think it's more important to double down on that positivity within organizations or where those good stories are and bringing that out rather than thinking more about or dwelling on the fact that things have not worked and, the environment is not good. Like, how can we shape it together? So bringing leaders into the conversation, inculcating that empathy, um, celebrating the positivity, other things I feel that work really well. So that's what I end up focusing on in my environment too.
Sounds really interesting. And what is also interesting for me to ask you as a coach, your career is absolutely fantastic with over 20 years in that. And I think you saw many stories of women progressing in their careers. And one of the ways how we can support women is through sponsorship. Can you give us your vision of difference between sponsorship and mentorship?
Yeah. I mean, these definitions, it's not very different from what you would have heard in the past as well. Sponsors usually seek you. You would want to look for mentors for yourself, but sponsors usually seek you. And that comes from, honestly, really the value that you can drive for them, for the organization, as well as for them as well, right? I have personally never seen someone ask a question, hey, will you mentor me? Or can you be my mentor? Or can you be my sponsor? I have never seen those questions lead to a lot of positive outcomes, right? Like, I don't think I've ever asked that question or early in my career when I did, like, I don't think I ever got a positive response. And voila, tomorrow, someone was a sponsor in the organization or a mentor in the organization, right? I think sponsorship is very critical because it is really about people supporting you, helping bring in opportunities for you when you're not in the room. But I think the journey for that starts way outside the room, right? It's really about spending the time with people, building those relationships, helping them understand the value that you bring or the qualities that you have but then it's also about creating value for them as an individual, right? How do you help them fuel, their areas or help them achieve their goals in many ways as far as the business is concerned? So I don't think there's any free lunch, to be honest. It all comes from essentially, at the end of the day, providing a value to people and the skills that you bring to the table. So as I said, the journey starts outside of the room. Women, as we say, shoo away from tooting their own horns, right? And I think a lot of times I feel there's no dearth of competence, but there's definitely dearth of confidence. And so you seek sponsors, you identify them, but you don't really ask like, hey, are you going to be my sponsor? You kind of have to show it in different ways for them to realize that actually she brings a lot to the table. And and I want to be the one who wants to help propel that career forward. And I have a lot to offer here as well. So why don't we treat this as a partnership and do this together? So those are the areas where I have seen it's been really, really valuable. Not necessarily so much about like, you just asking for people to do a favor, because I don't think that ever sort of works in your benefit for that matter.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you pointed this out because we were discussing it a bit earlier with Shivam, and we had a conversation about whether you can actually ask someone to be a sponsor or what should you do to find a sponsor in your organization. And this is actually something that I wanted to ask you, like, can you do some formal things to attract a sponsor or make someone sponsor you? And you already answered that probably there is no like formal way to do it. Usually just showing that you're capable of bringing more value, more impact. And then do I understand it correct that you should kind of hope that someone might sponsor you if you have an intention of growing or progressing in your career?
I don't think we can rely on hope, to be honest. Like, I think that would be wishful thinking. My intention here is more about like have the intention, have the plan, have the thought process that's what you are intentionally seeking. And then kind of go about demonstrating your value in the process. Seek sponsors yourself, but for them to be your sponsor, you don't really have to be asking the question, hey, will you be my sponsor? Because that helps by showing that value. But you develop that relationship that builds that sponsorship automatically in that conversation. You have to build that relationship over time. You have to spend the time to seek that value from them as well. And then, using those kind of conversations to help build that relationship over time is what I think really helps. So it's less about, here are my list of people who I'm going to say are my sponsors. It's more about building that network, building that relationship, continuously working with people around you, continuously building that network who understand the qualities that you bring, who understand the value that you bring to the table, who understand that you are the one who's actually not going to fail them either, right? You're going to help them shine as well. And so I think those aspects are really important in terms of seeking sponsors, in terms of working with sponsors.
Yeah, it's a great answer, and it feels like there is no magic pill. There is no like magic phrase you can say to someone, boom, you have a sponsor. It's about showing value, bringing actual value. And what I really liked about what you just said is building a relationship. And I think this is one of the really important thoughts, that to get a sponsor is one thing, but then you have to maintain the relationship and actually build, develop it. And it's commitment. It takes time. It takes energy to do. Without it, without a good and close relationship, I think it's impossible to move forward.
Yeah, I think I'll just add that the concept of mentorship is probably a little bit more deeper and more personal, right? From a mentor, you're seeking to fill a hole that you might have or a blind spot that you have, and they help you see through that. So you're going into a more deeper personal relationship with a mentor for the most part. With a sponsor, for lack of a better word, it is a more transactional type of a relationship, right? And it is a value exchange that is happening. And you're not necessarily doing projects for them or running around and getting their coffees. That's not the goal. But what is happening there is that you transacting on something that you bring to the organization, and they are transacting with you in return when your name is being called out in performance reviews or the next opportunities. We actually did a poll for our podcast, and we saw an overwhelming majority of people wanted to learn about sponsorship. And that intrigued both of us because I thought like there's no magical charm here that we need to talk about. This just naturally happens. It's a part of organizations run. But why is that such a myth that needs to be busted? Is why we wanted to very actively talk about it on the podcast. So thank you so much for debunking the myth with us. It's about what you bring to the table. It's important to know that these are the levers in an organization to grow your career, and not having it is going to hurt you. But you, at the same time, it's not completely something that you can orchestrate.
Absolutely. I think network is really important. And sometimes I have noticed that, the line can be crossed between, we try to demarcate between mentor, sponsor, and from definition, of course, it completely makes sense. But I have also seen cases where it becomes a blurry line sometimes, right? Depends on where they are, who they are. At the end of the day, it's your network that kind of seeks you that opportunity. It's your existing relationships that seek you that opportunity as well. And so it's important to, respect those relationships, treat those relationships with a lot of care as well, because you'll learn from them. And then you just don't know whether through a mentor or through a sponsor where you will find that opportunity. And it's not usually only within the organization. You can find those people outside the organization as well, right? So I think you got to work that within and outside. Like, I think it's important. I felt like for the longest time, and Shivam, you and I have talked about this at length, I felt like having been in an organization sometimes for a very long time, you do become very inward focused, right? Because, and especially like we were in a company like Google, which is just so fantastic, right? The sheer talent around you is just so amazing. And if day in and day out you're interacting with such amazing people, I felt like I never felt the need to look outside at that time. And it's only when I left Google is where I started to kind of seek uh, those kind of relationships outside the company. And of course, like, a lot of people left Google, so it was a good network to have anyways, because, all talented people kind of going in other places and working as well. But it is important, to look outside your circle that you're interacting with day in and day out, and not being stuck to that, because you never know, where opportunity might exist and what you're going to learn from that space, and how that might shape your career in many ways, or your professional as well as personal lives in many ways. So just don't look inwards, look outwards as well, and seek those relationships, seek those opportunities.
That's a brilliant point. Yep.
Yeah, what a wonderful advice to look outside. And I actually wanted to ask you about your past experience, because people usually really like real life stories. And maybe you can share a couple of stories about, I know that you provided sponsorship, and you also had sponsors in your career. So you've been on both sides. Could you share a couple of really impactful stories that impacted your career when you were a sponsor, and also when you provided sponsorship? Of course.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like there was more about um there was, in terms of when I benefited from it. I think it was more about someone seeing something in me that I wasn't really able to see myself, and helping point that out to me when maybe I didn't think I could do it, or didn't have the confidence, or was suffering from imposter syndrome, or wanted to do it, but I thought like I was probably not the right person, or not right, or not rightly qualified. So at one point in my career, I remember taking on the team that I was working on, and it was a woman leader I was reporting to. And, it was a okay relationship. I felt like we wouldn't really talk about careers or so on and so forth a whole lot. It was a short period of time as well. But I think my ability to build relationships with people in the organization, to manage stakeholders really well and build relationship with them as well, which I didn't think I was good at. I would just do it because I liked doing it. At some point, they nominated my name to take on that team. And that was actually, it came as a huge surprise and a shock to me because I never thought that I was capable of doing something like that. It was a large team. There were very senior people on the team. And I think for those leaders at that time in the organization to feel that one, I'm capable of it, and two, I'm going to do a fantastic job of it. And when I have doubts in my mind, really help clear those doubts in my head. I felt at that point was a turning point in my own life or in my own career. So I think that sponsorship sort of happened without me being in the room, without me really even realizing that I could do it. But it was just the value creation I felt like we were talking about earlier that but that made me feel that, gosh, it's important for me to spot these as well, right? It's important for me to then help, whether it's other women or not just women, like other people who are either reporting to me or are are in other organizations who I'm working with, to spot those like qualities that they really have and help them realize, understand, or see when they themselves will not be able to see that, right? And this was like, I would say about like 15, not maybe 17, some years ago. But it really shaped my thinking and really, having benefited from that sponsorship without even realizing that people are sponsoring me. I have tried to do sponsorship actually just not just in tech, but outside of tech as well. So, for example, like I've obviously sought a lot of help from many women as I was growing in my career. Now, those women came in shapes and forms of household help or nannies, or so many, that my support network essentially. And I felt like there were so many women who helped me when I didn't have to worry about home and I was traveling. And so for me, it's also not necessarily just about kind of, living and breathing that in a work environment and in tech, helping women who are your support network outside of the work environment as well, to help them seek opportunities, to help them find opportunities that they don't think that they're capable of because they're not in a role like tech. They're not in a company like an Amazon or a Google or a DevRev or any of these companies for that matter, right? So it has to be a combination of, as I said, like, look inwards, look outwards. And so I tend to focus some of my energy there as well to sponsor those women, in the world who are helping us all become successful in the world.
That's a beautiful thought. Yes, I think we don't realize how many people we're impacting in our just day-to-day lives, and it's all about living your values. So whether you are doing that sponsorship at work or at home, it's living your values every day. So wonderful. One of the thoughts that I was having, and I was noodling whether just to talk about it or not, but we'll just go because that's the spirit of this podcast. We have candid conversations, especially in senior levels. When you don't have the sponsorship, you will feel it, you will experience it.
Yeah.
And I've been in this situation where I really needed sponsorship for something, and I did not have it in the room. It just wasn't there, which actually led me to make very drastic decisions of like, well, maybe this is it. This is the end of the road for me. With this role. And what are the symptoms of when you know that this sponsorship is lacking? Is basically the misalignment between where you think your career needs to go and where the organization thinks they want to take your career. And that just becomes so apparent to you that the role you are wanting to play and what you see as your growth is clearly not aligned with what the organization needs in that hour. And hence, you're not able to get all of those people who've mentored, supported, and sponsored you all this while. They're just unable to support this. And this is where I think sponsorship and mentorship, just that the myth becomes a little bit more mystical. So you will know it if you don't have the sponsorship. I think it's especially in higher levels. And it's good to have that conversation. And to Meghna's point, we cannot say, I need sponsors, so let me go find them. But if you're seeing that you are not getting that alignment in your leadership teams, or you're not seeing that sponsorship around you for what you think is the next step, you start with your manager and ask the question, why is it that where I'm trying to go, I'm unable to secure the support of my leadership? And I've actually been in those situations where I wish I had asked the questions deeper. So I would just, as a message for the audience is, if you think something's missing, ask the question, start with your manager. You might be surprised. They might be willing to tell you more.
I think that very well said, Shivam. I think that goes for allies. And, as we were having the conversation earlier about what can companies do or what can leaders do or what can other people in the organization do, I think transparent and open communication definitely helps, right? Just having clarity on what is expected, how you're delivering, that radical candor, whether it's women or not women, it doesn't really matter. But I think that radical candor in the organization really helps. So what you're good at, what you're not good at, like how, and then just that feedback loop for that matter. Flip, like the other side of it to what you're saying, I would also say that sometimes there are cases where that you're not maybe getting the support or not getting the mentorship, sponsorship, feedback, and put that progress, that growth that you're looking at. I think it's important to have the grit to kind of stick with it for a little bit. Ask the right sort of questions, as you said, like be more curious, be asking deeper level questions. But then it's also important to take a step back and evaluate the environment around you and see whether that will happen or not, right? It may not happen. So it's also okay to have the courage to leave that environment and
Yeah.
go somewhere where you will have that support. So there's a fine balance between having that grit and like really keeping at it. I think giving it a fair chance, giving it a fair trial, seeking that honest, clear input, but time boxing it as well also helps, because women tend to sometimes stick on to these things longer and give yourself excuses. Okay, maybe that person was more deserving, or maybe I did not provide that level of impact that I should have. But it's important to kind of look at it with open eyes, and honestly, like if the environment is not good, then it's okay to get up and leave also.
Well said. Well said. You touched upon an interesting topic on allyship, something that is very dear to my heart, and I've always said that my career is a story of allyship. I can give credit, but I think it's all because of the allies that I found in the system, and it's not just seniors; it's been across. It's a very 360-degree effect that allies have. I've worked with people who have reported into me who have been the strongest allies, and I'm more grateful for them today for accepting me to be the woman leader, and that has a more profound effect, in fact, than some of the allies who are maybe above you or in higher up in the chain. So let's talk about allyship, and the part I want to hone into is something you brought up, which is it's all about leading with empathy, right? The question I have is how do we bridge that empathy gap that can sometimes seep into organizations, especially tech being so male dominated. There is this very logical brain that is running an organization, which can sometimes be unable to empathize with where women are coming from, or just people from different minorities are coming from. How do we bridge that gap, which will make allyship even more convincing?
Yeah. Um, I think the story of sisterhood is also very important, right? When we talk about allies, allies don't necessarily only have to be male allies. You can be women allies also, right? So relying on that sisterhood around you to build each other up rather than tear each other apart, right, is also very, 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 very important. And a lot of times, what I'm noticing these days, I personally feel that way as well. Like, you don't want to be the person who's always sort of talking about, okay, women have been traditionally X, Y, and Z, and so now we should do A, B, and C, right? I don't think that at least that doesn't energize me personally, I would say. And whether it's work-life balance or talking about kids, I see more men these days talking about kids, picking up kids, you know, taking care of dinner and so on and so forth at home as well, right? So I think that it's we always talk about bringing your whole self to work, but the environment has to sort of match that. Like I don't think women can easily talk about that sometimes at work as well. But seeking that one or two people who do give importance to that, highlighting that positivity in that environment, bringing those out in the conversation really helps. I've actually had a manager once who, no matter what, would just leave at 5. And they were like, I have very young kids. I have very limited time to spend with them. No matter what, I have to leave at 5 to go spend a few hours with them. I feel like that was so empowering. And that would always not be possible. But, but the fact that they brought it up was very easy for others to then bring it up as well. The way I feel allyship can help is by, whether it's men, whether it's women, bringing that personal side of you at work into the conversations that actually makes you look like a human and not necessarily a working robot who would be available 24/7. And, being empathetic towards that, just that. Right? Don't think the concept of work-life balance works anymore, to be honest, because we are always so connected. It's a global workforce, so it's really more about work-life integration for people these days, and different practices work for different people at the moment, right? Like, for example, I'm working these days a lot with a lot of international countries. And so, my mornings are occupied, evenings are occupied, but I have a little bit more flexibility during the day. And so I'm able to, get things done during the day, which I would not be able to otherwise. So there's a benefit to that as well. And so, it's just really formulating your life and then talking about it in ways that has helped you as a person. It's okay to talk about that you're a human and you have a personal life. And, but you're not going to let that get into the work that you're doing. You're going to find a way. And I think that's what usually everyone is looking for.
It's a good point, and kudos on the sisterhood element. I do think sometimes I feel the value that I'm providing by being the only woman in a room of 18 men is that if I see something, I will say something, right? Especially if the remaining 17 are going to be doing something on the floor, or they have teammates, or they have people who are reporting into them who have some concerns, they're going to come to me because they know there is one woman who's in that room of 18 who can see it, who can voice it. And so that allyship, I was kind of blind to that until you just said it, that yes, there's allyship goes all across all genders.
Yeah, I think that sisterhood, I think, is really, really critical. I feel like as women, we don't give as much importance to that. But the story of sisterhood is that honestly that keeps us going. So let's just not rely only on men. Of course, that's important, but I do feel we have to rely on other women to help.
It's really interesting. But of course, from my side, I want to know a little bit more about how man can actually be a great ally, and how can we not only formally show our support, but they actually make a difference. Can we talk a little bit about mistakes and misconceptions? So let's say some male athlete wants to show his support, and based on your experience, what are the most common mistakes or maybe misconceptions have around supporting women in tech, and what should we avoid?
I would say, let's not make everything a woman issue for that matter, right? Like, good intentions, but when you try to help someone, that I'm here to help you because you're a woman, or you may not be able to, do X, but I will help you get there. I don't think that that's helpful, because I think that just breaks confidence. Inviting people to the table to share their opinions, I think that is very important. Like, giving that seat at the table is so critical. I think it's very easy to ignore sometimes, because the loudest one, in the room will always, grab the attention. Women tend to not talk as much. Really inviting them and just saying simple things like, "What do you think?" Right? Just makes a big difference, because it'll just encourage them to speak up more. And it may not be that conversation, they may not contribute too much in that conversation, but next time they know that if they're able to say something, or shape the conversation. So I would say just inviting dialogue is really critical, and not making it in behind the scenes, like, let's help each other out because we know that you're gonna drive the impact, take the business forward, uplift people around you more than anything else. So there could be a laundry list of things that we can talk about, but I would just stick to that for now, because I feel like this itself will help build confidence in women.
We are almost tearing to the end of this, Meghna. One of the questions I wanted to ask and learn more about the initiatives you're driving at DevRev with respect to women in AI. It's a brave new world out there, especially for women. We're barely catching up to the skills required to make a place in this economy and in this ecosystem. And then we have a new technology frontier ahead of us. What are you doing personally in this space? What advice do you have for the listeners? And talk us a little bit about the initiatives that you're leading at DevRap.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's definitely we are in the era where this is going to really reshape how we think about jobs, how we think about employment so much in the future, right? And so it's really reshaping, redefining organizations, functions in the way we operate. Obviously, access to STEM is an issue, right? For women, we know that the numbers itself speak for that. Then women do tend to take a lot of career breaks as well. Um, and I think what we've also observed is that being able to, experiment with new tech is not something that women do that easily as compared to men. And there's so many studies that really show that as well, that men will adapt new tech a lot faster than actually women will, right? And so there's a sense of being afraid of new technology. And I'm not just talking about women in tech. Honestly, I'm talking about like women out there in the world, like doing all sorts of things. And AI, as we know, is going to impact a lot of, administrative jobs, support jobs, some of these industries where we find women a lot more than men as well. And so I feel like if we don't help a situation like this, it's very much possible in the future that along with this whole fear of losing jobs, women could be going out and taking a maternity leave, comes back in 6 months, and that job that they have, the skills that they had are no longer needed because a bot has taken that over essentially. So, Deborah, we feel that you're an AI first company. It is really important for us to educate women and not just like educate them on LLMs, vector databases, but really the tools that are simple tools that are out there that they can use to benefit themselves. Like I know for us here in the Valley, like ChatGPT, Claude, all of these things are like at the tip of our fingertips, but I'm not sure if even here everybody really realizes the power of how you can use that to their advantage. And so think about women who are sort of in remote places and a place like India or Philippines, or really sitting in a call center, for example, responding to queries. And so we're running initiatives, especially Grace, which is kind of, on the, it's an ode to the legendary Grace Hopper. So Grace with an AI to, educate women in the field of AI and, from really small scale learning the tools that are out there to educating engineers, product managers, and so on and so forth in school to empower them. Because I truly believe that it's not just really impacting the jobs and careers that they have, but giving them opportunities. I feel really shapes the society, the world outside, and it's so important to put that in front and center and help them educate on the new era that's we've all in, and give them the tools for them to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important to educating yourself on new tools. And my question was actually related to it. We have a tradition here in our podcast of asking people about valuable resources like books, courses, anything else that you found impactful or valuable for you recently. Maybe you can share something interesting you recently, or some kind of course might be also valuable for our listeners.
Yeah, I read a lot of blogs. I personally feel these days that absorbing bite-sized information is so much easier on the go. That's why these podcasts are also very good because, you're commuting, you're back to work, driving, so on and so forth. So what all can you do to, to just absorb that bite-sized information in a way that you actually go, like by the time you reach work, you have learned a nugget to go and apply right there, in that moment. Um, I love the podcast by Shane Parrish, The Knowledge Project. I think that's one of my favorite ones to go to. Grit is another one that I spend a good amount of time listening to. Um, yeah, so yeah, I think I'm a more audible person, utilizing my time on the go than anything else. So I would recommend a couple of those. Uh, yeah, and I really hope that yours would be one of the podcasts that kind of has that impact on many people out there as well, which I'm pretty sure will happen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It actually was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time and being our guest. It was great to learn from you and to learn from your experience. And we are really grateful for all the great knowledge you shared about sponsorship, about building your career, about being a woman in tech in general. It was extremely valuable.
Well, I'm just very, very thankful for your time. You're a very busy woman, and thank you so much for taking the time and spending it with us. This was extremely, extremely impactful for all our listeners. Just very uncharted territory that you have explored and done it with so much courage. So kudos to you, Meghna.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you, Shivam and Igor, for spending time. This was a lot of fun.